Hey everybody, it's Blaise, and today I'm going to be doing a little digital painting. I'm actually going to try to keep it fairly loose and fairly quick, but I thought it might be fun because I do a lot of paintings where I record the process and I just play them back at fast speed, and you see them in about 2.5 minutes. But I thought it might be kind of fun to just talk you through the entire process. We'll just sit here in real time. It'll be like you're sitting here in the studio with me, and I'll talk to you about kind of what I think about as I'm painting digitally. That's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing a digital painting. So why don't we just go ahead and dive in? The first thing I want to talk about is just my equipment. So right now I'm using a Cintiq that's made by Wacom. It's a 27-inch screen. So it's fairly large. It's a 4K screen. So, and I have the ability to draw and paint right on the screen using my stylus. So it's a very cool process. Not all of you can use one of these, obviously. So one of the other things I recommend is using a tablet, a bamboo tablet, anything else, that's similar, which is just having a little, it's a little square tablet that you draw on and you see the cursor come up on the screen. The one thing that you really can't do, and some people try, is to draw and paint with your mouse. Some people might disagree with me, but to do what we're going to do today, or what I'm going to do today, you really need to have that ability to, draw and paint either on a tablet or on the screen. Now, if you have trouble, if you struggle at drawing on a tablet, then one of the things that you can do is you can go off and you can do a sketch on paper, and then you can scan that and bring that into Photoshop. Okay, and then you can draw and paint right over the top of that. Which brings me to the next bit. For software, I'm using the latest version of Photoshop. It's Photoshop CC. But the things that I'm going to be doing today are not super advanced. And so if you have an older version of Photoshop, you'll be able to do the same things that I'm going to be doing today. All right. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? I've already done a rough sketch. Now, the reason I've kind of dove in already and done that, because one of the biggest things, I might have an inspiration for kind of an idea of what I want to do in my head. I go and exercise in the morning, and I watch nature programs on my phone while I'm, doing the elliptical machine. And so this morning I was watching a documentary on Sri Lanka and the wildlife of Sri Lanka, and I got really kind of inspired to do something from that region. And so I went home and I started going through my own reference. And I found these images from when I was in Thailand. I've got an elephant here. There was a big elephant festival that we were going to. And so I just started, I had this idea of where I wanted to put this elephant, an Asian elephant, in this lily pond in Sri Lanka. And I want it to feel like kind of a hot afternoon, some butterflies coming by, giving a little personality to the elephant, something simple. And so I started going through and I found some images. This is an image actually of an elephant that we would take out into the jungles and ride in Nepal. So one thing I like to stress is shooting your own imagery if you can. Pulling it off the internet, if you're not really familiar with the subject and you're just kind of going off of photos that you find on the internet, it's kind of difficult to get accuracy in your work. I have a lot of photographs that I've shot of elephants while I was there. I was sketching the elephants in person. I've kind of got a sense of, their form and everything already. And I like to kind of back up what I've got in my brain with my photographs and use them as inspiration. So I've got these photos, and so I'm going to use these. And then I just kind of kept in my head some of that imagery that I saw of the lily ponds and reeds and things like that in Sri Lanka. So I decided to do this very simple composition. And this is what I sketched out. Now, going back to why I'm starting with the sketch, I'll do a lot of different sketches. I do a lot of searching until I find that one image that I like. I'll turn it vertical, I'll turn it horizontal, I'll blow the elephant up, I'll shrink it down. I tried all kinds of different ideas and compositions until I find something that I like. And that can take a long time. Sometimes it takes hours. And if I've found in the past when I've started to record that process, it just goes on forever. So I wanted to start with you guys where at least I had something established already. So I've got this quick sketch. And so I thought I would talk to you guys a little bit about my process there. One of the things you'll see, I've got all the sketches in a group over on the right side. And you can see I do each layer, I do everything on its own layer because you can see there's the elephant there, there's the reflection. I want to be able to move things around. I want to move elements around. It's sort of like in the old days when we used to do before we had digital art, we used to do our sketches on tracing paper and we would kind of move them around on the canvas and until we would find something that we liked. My subject matter, I would actually cut out of the tracing paper and kind of move it around until I find the composition that I like. Well, now, working digitally, I have that, it's a much better ability to move elements around. And so I try to keep them separate. Once I have that composition that I like, which I've done here, then I'll go ahead and start to tie everything down. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is composition. I kind of brought, if you look at where the horizon is, I've kind of brought that up about a third of the way. I'm a big believer in the rule of thirds, okay? And the rule of thirds meaning I divide it up horizontally into thirds, the composition, and then I'll divide it vertically into thirds, the composition, and try to hit areas of interest on those intersecting lines. It's not always, it's basically good composition in my book is if it looks good, it is good. But working with the rule of thirds tends to, it gives you a leg up, okay? So what I've done here is I've created this horizon line way down on the bottom. And then if you look, if I broke this up into thirds here, basically the main part of the mass of the elephant is hitting right on that third line over here. And then I've also discovered if I'm using thirds, then a lot of times I can get away with putting an absolute center of interest, a thing where I really want the audience to look, I can put it dead center. And I do that, if you look at my work, you'll see that very often in a lot of my work. And what I've done is, I've put that eye of that elephant right in dead center of this composition, right here. I've done that on purpose, right there, okay? Because everything else is balanced, so I have that ability to do that. And also, if you look at a third of the way down here, coming across horizontally, that feeds right into that trunk, which is going to go up into the butterflies eventually. So that's what I'm thinking about from a composition standpoint. There's nothing in here that's random. I'm really thinking about where I want the eye to go. You'll also notice too, I wanted to add a foreground element, so I very quickly sketched in these reeds that ultimately, when we finish the painting, will sit over the top. And I've purposely created them to go to the left because I've got this action here where you're going to follow you'll follow the elephant trunk and right up into the butterflies, which eventually they're going to look like they're flying out from left to right. So I wanted these reeds to kind of lead the eye up into the elephant and then out and out. So we would have this kind of circular movement through the composition. Once again, that was all done purposely. Okay, so once again, I'm going to go ahead and start tying this down. And I'll bring it down pretty low like so and create a new layer on top. And now I can start to draw. Now, I may or may not or I may or may not keep these elements separate. But let me knock up this opacity a little bit. There we go. And I've knocked that opacity way down. There we go. Now we can go a little better. Now I might just do all of this all on one layer because eventually I'm going to get rid of the drawing anyway. So here I'm going to push the caricature of the elephant a little bit. I'm not going to make it completely realistic. So I'm going to I want to come in and just play with the eye a little bit, maybe just a touch, not much at all, but maybe give him just a little bit of expression. And I'm using those reference photos that I showed you. I'm using those, looking back at those right now. Right now I'm really paying attention to this guy right here, looking at what's going on in the face and using that. I'm actually going to use that lighting too. I like the rim lighting on the elephant. I may push it. So I always make sure that I have sufficient reference. That's a must for me. Even though I know, my animals a lot, because I do a lot of drawing of animals, it's always nice to have something to come, fall back on. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the size of this tusk. I might go a little bit bigger with it, just because I think it might be a little bit more fun to have a bigger tusked animal. You can see I'm trying to open up that mouth a little bit more. I want to get a little bit more expression in there. And a lot of times when I'm doing these videos, the reason I don't like to do, in the past, haven't liked to do real-time videos is, it can be like grass growing, watching grass grow. So it's, I hope you get something out of this. And sometimes it's difficult to keep on talking, but I'll try to do both. I'll try to stay interesting and keep on talking. So I'm just going to extend that tusk out, I think, just a little bit, just to add a little bit more interest to it. Okay. Now there's a little bit of skin that's going to come over, but the reason I like to tie down my drawing and not dive right into the painting is, and you probably could, and some people do, and they kind of explore the painting as they go, and that's a perfectly viable technique. I like, with each step that I do, I like to be as developed as I can, so that I don't like to keep guessing all the way through the process. Here, I'm just sketching in that ear really quick. So I like to, it doesn't mean that it won't change, because sometimes it will. I want to get this cheekbone in here, and there's a big hollow that comes down right in here. I'm going to come off of there. So I just want to make sure that, I've got everything thought out with each step that I attempt. And there's a big hollow in here. I did a lot of observation on the elephants when I was in Nepal a few years ago, and we were riding elephants into the jungle. We were tracking rhinos and tigers, and so I got to be pretty intimate with seeing how they're built and that sort of thing, and their head shapes are extremely interesting. And I'm just, even though I'm tying it down, I don't want to spend a ton of time. I just want to get in here and just tie down things enough that I can get on with the painting. Now you'll notice here, there's a difference between Asian elephants and African elephants. There's size differences. Asian elephants that I'm drawing here have smaller ears. Their body shapes are a little bit different. And right now, where I'm drawing the trunk, the end of the trunk has, they basically have little fingers on the end they're kind of dexterous. You can see them pick up peanuts and stuff like that. Well, on an Asian elephant, there's only one finger. And on an African elephant, they've got two. They can do both of that, like that. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. So I'm just going to quickly bring this down through. And this, the underside of the trunk has some texture to it as well. But I'll get that in the painting. And like I said, this painting I'm going to keep fairly rough, even though I'm really tying down this drawing. There we go. I got a little iris in there, a little pupil. And I want to keep the silhouette of the elephant nice and simple too. And that's, I'm very, very conscious of silhouette. I more often than not, I err on the side of something being very clear in silhouette. A lot of times you can do paintings where you have things overlapping toward the viewer, and that's perfectly fine because they're, you're creating an image. Maybe you want to create depth or something like that. My paintings tend to be a little bit more flat and graphic. It's just a personal taste, and And so I always shoot for that clear silhouette. Like if I blacked in this elephant completely, you could tell that it's an elephant just simply by its silhouette. And so I get very conscious of that. And here I just want to get a little bit of that texture of the wrinkly skin on the elbow. And notice how low those elbows are on the on an elephant. And I'll show you a little trick here. Once I get this, to get this reflection, I cheat. And you notice I'm keeping the camera, the viewpoint, very low because there's a reason for that in the way I'm going to cheat on this reflection. And this comes right down. This actually is going right into the knee. The knee is really right there. I'm going to come down off this tail. And they have wrinkles that kind of go around and go right into the crotch. There we go. And this whole section in here, I'm going to put all of this whole back part of the elephant, I'm going to put that into shadow. Now, one of the things I'm thinking about that anatomy that's happening underneath the elephant's skin. I know that there's a shoulder up here that goes, there's the shoulder actually right here up into the shoulder blades up in here, which comes into the elbow. And so I want to be to all of that. I'm thinking about the general shape of the elephant's skull. Even though I'm using reference, I don't depend solely on the reference. I think about what's happening under that skin. So here, I'm thinking about this pelvis. There's a pelvis underneath with hips, and I want it slightly turned towards me. I want a little bit of a twist to the body here. And that feeds right into the tail. There's this kind of ridge that goes right down, feeds right into that tail. There we go. And you'll notice that I'm trying to keep, because it's a low angle, I'm trying to keep the water contact lines fairly straight across and even with each other, because I cheat. I cheat anywhere I can when I'm doing digital paintings. And so here, I'll show you what I do to get the reflection. So I'll just take that layer and repeat it. You can see, all of a sudden you see, oh my gosh, it just got dark. Well, I'm going to come up to edit, and I'm going to go to transform. I'm going to flip it vertically. So now you go, wow, we just flipped it vertically and it looks kind of weird. Well, it does. But now I can grab my move tool, and I'm just going to pull this down, and bingo, we've got a reflection. And I'll do that with the painting as well. So there we go, just like so. Nice and simple. So now I don't have to deal with drawing in the reflection. Then usually, I think what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and combine those layers. And label it. Okay, and this group, I'm just going to go ahead and call it rough sketch. Try to get in the habit of labeling everything. It just really helps. So now this elephant is kind of in the mid-ground, so I'm going to create a layer underneath. And here I'm just going to be a little bit looser. I'll probably go a little bit bigger with the paintbrush. And I'm just going to, I don't want it to be perfectly straight across. That's pretty boring. Even though you can see I've got a line that I created just as a guide. Now I'm just going to lightly lay in some reeds. And like I said, this is really just for me to have a guide for later when I start laying in color. I'm going to be very loose. This whole painting is going to be fairly loose and fairly impressionistic. Otherwise, it'd take me, hours and hours and hours. Here, I'm trying to keep this down to about an hour and a half or so, or an hour. Famous last words. And now I'm going to create a layer on top, and I'm going to call it reeds. And I just want to be very loose, very spontaneous. Some of them maybe are broken. And these will be a guide for me for when I paint over the top of them. And you'll notice I want to overlap, so I want to get a sense of depth. I want to overlap the elephant. I want that illusion of you're looking right into, right into this world. Here, have them cross over. There we go. And ultimately, we're going to have, I'm going to have some reeds and stuff, not reeds, but lily pads right here in the water. And then back here, I'm going to create a one more layer behind the elephant. And I really don't absolutely need this, but just for the sake of explaining, this is kind of a tree line, and I want this to be dark. The reason I want it to be dark is I want this elephant, when I create the light on the elephant's trunk and head and all that rim lighting, I want that to really pop. I want it to be dramatic. I want it to glow. And so one way to do that is to create a background behind the elephant that's dark. So I purposely made this elephant kind of close to the far shore so that we could get a nice big thing of trees, back there to create kind of a backdrop. It's going to be very loose because I want all the detail, all the interest to be right where the elephant is, okay? Now, one of the things I did is I like to be accurate with my imagery. And so I went in and I went on the internet and I found this little piece of this little illustration of some of the butterflies of Sri Lanka. The illustration is going to be very loose, so I wanted something to where I could at least get the colors and maybe a little bit of the shapes accurate, and I'll be using that as reference as I come in here and start to draw some of these butterflies in. And right now I'm going to go ahead and put a layer over the elephant, but under the reeds, and call that butterflies. And then just lightly sketch them in. And I'm thinking about, what position their wings can be in. I want variety. So I go very loose. And I don't know that butterflies would necessarily flock like this, but but I'm kind of taking some artistic license, and I want like a little magical feel to this illustration. Maybe some are back there. And just really thinking about, okay, what kind of shapes can these butterflies take? There. Maybe some over here. Once again, thinking about wanting to create some depth. Don't like that shape. There we go. You really can get away with some pretty basic shapes as long as the colors in there are accurate. So that's the sketch. Kind of tied down. And once again, let me go back to my reeds. See what happens when you label everything, you can find it. And for those of you that do digital painting, if you don't label your stuff, you know what I'm talking about when you have to turn things off and turn them back on again in order to find them. All right, so I wanted to add a little bit of reeds over here just to give you a little bit more thrust going that way to keep the eye inside the composition. And then here I'll probably bring a few of these up a little higher and maybe a little more vertical so that they kind of bring the eye right up into the elephant, just like so. So now I'm ready to start laying in some basic color. So I'm going to go underneath all of these layers, underneath all the drawing layers, and I'm going to lay in some local color. And I like to start from the absolute background and work forward. So we're going to start with the sky and the trees and all that. And let's see here. Let me go, I'm just going to go, let's add a kind of a bluish, I'll go blue sky, just straight up blue sky. I'm going to go a little warm with it because it's low on the horizon. There we go. Maybe something a little kind of turquoisey, if that's a word. All right, and I'm just going to quickly lay that in right back here. I'm not going to worry about, anything right now as far as varying up the color. You know, we'll be able to do that later. I just want to get a basic sense of what we're going to get. So now I'm going to go in and just grab, I want to go fairly dark green with it. Let me see here, I've got some reference I was looking at over here. So we can go kind of green with it. I'm actually going to put a new layer over the top. I'm just going to call that sky, because then I'll be able to play with the trees independently of the sky. Oop, I put tree. There we go. So here I'm going to just very quickly, very roughly, like I said, I want this whole thing to be fairly impressionistic. So I've got this brush that I'm using. It's a custom brush. It's kind of chalky. I make my own brushes. And I just want to lay this in. And as far as how to make your own brush, that's a whole other video. There's a lot of information on the internet that you can find on how to make your brushes, and I'll definitely be doing a tutorial on that soon. But for now, because I'm focusing on this painting, I'm going to go a little bit more opaque. There we go. We'll just have to wait. So I'm going to increase that size, and you can see, you know, it's a nice chalky feel. I'm just going very, very loose, coming down, and I'm just going to let that fade out. Now, here's a cool thing that you can do, that I do this a lot. So I've got this layer, and I'm going to go ahead and lock it. This little checker board right here, I'm going to go ahead and lock that. Now, the only place that color will be applied is when I'm drawing over that layer. So anything outside the layer, it won't paint. So I'm going to vary up some of the color. I'm going to try hitting some blues in here. And notice that I'm trying to keep it the same value meaning light and dark. Because it's in the background, I'm going to go lighter too on that opacity. Maybe a little bigger on the brush to get a little bit more grain. I just want to play with some of this color back here and just get it varied up. And so you can see, even though I'm drawing right over the top of the sky, because I have that tree layer locked, it's not painting anywhere else. So I'm just getting a little bit more variance in some of that color. And I'm going to go a little deeper down in here. And like I said, I want to keep this whole thing pretty loose. That feels pretty good. And because I'm envisioning the rim lighting and the light's going to be kind of off in the background to the right, that tree is going to go ahead and catch a little bit of lighting on top. So I'm going to create a new layer because I want to experiment. I don't want to mess up the layer that's there. And I'm going to go with some really hot greens. Maybe a little grayed out. I'm going more towards the gray because it's in the background. I don't want the color to be too pure, but I do want it to be kind of hot, kind of bright. And I'm going to go a little bit, I'm going to grab a different brush, one of my other custom brushes that I use a lot. That was my sketching brush. This is my sketching brush that I do all my drawing with. And I'm just going to draw over the top. Actually, I'm going to put this layer right over the top of there. So I want to cover up the drawing. Actually, no, I'm going to keep that back here. And when it comes time to get rid of the drawing, then we'll do that. So I just want to add a little bit of, maybe just a little bit of color. Go a little bigger here. Back on these trees. I'm going very, very loose. But I'm really thinking about value. Okay. And now I'm going to put a layer on top of that. I'm really building my layers as I'm working forward. I know I've got some grasses and reeds and stuff like this in the background that I want to play with. And I'm imagining some of the sunlight hitting that, but I'm going to start a little bit darker, just a little bit, but a little bit more pure green this time. Actually, I want to go back with my other brush. There we go. I'm going to just let that fade out. And I might even add a little bit of like mist, dust in the air. That'll cover up a lot of this. So I'm not too worried. I keep my backgrounds, if they're not, you know, really in focus, I'll keep them loose. It's not going to be, I don't want this to be the, you know, all the focus of the image. I'm lightly just kind of letting it fade off into the background. I go a little smaller with this brush and maybe create just loosely some interest back here. Maybe there's a few plants here and there. Maybe I can go a little cooler and a little darker with it. I'm going to create a layer underneath, and maybe there's just in the background in shadow, there's a few more plants back here. Once again, just keeping it loose. Keeping it loose. There we go. Come back to my layer here. There. Now I'm going to go a little hotter with it and a little brighter. Well, that's a lot brighter. All right. And just creating loosely a little bit more interest back here. Maybe some of the light is flooding across in the negative spaces. So now those bushes feel like they're popping out a little bit. Just trying to create variance in that background. Once again, I want to keep this nice and loose. Just like so. Maybe some of it is coming up there. Maybe we got a little bit of mud. I'm going to come over here. Get a little, you know, as we get closer to the water, maybe we're getting a little bit of mud coming across. You'll notice too that I draw right through the elephant because I want it to feel like it's all kind of connected. And go a little darker. And maybe grab my other brush. Whoops. Go a little bigger with that. Now I can add little bits of detail. And just having fun, not worrying about it, making little happy patches of mud back here. There we go. Maybe we're creating a little bit more shadow. Now notice now I'm getting a little more detailed. Start out loose. I'm thinking about shadow coming across. Casting shadow across like so. Maybe there's some nice little shadow areas in the grass along here. Staying really, really loose. That's a big thing of, you know, when you're painting, even if you're painting traditionally, you know, don't labor over it. Painting's supposed to be fun. You know, enjoy it. And one of the ways to enjoy it is just to kind of get in there and start slinging some color around. That's what I'm doing now. I'm just slinging color. Now I'm not being sloppy about it. I'm thinking about what the light is doing and all of that. So like right now now we're getting to a place where I want to start picking out very selectively some little hot spots just to keep you know, the interest up. There's a little hot spot in that negative space back there. Maybe this is catching light, you know, and it'll draw the eye against that dark back there where it goes into shadow. There's some hot spots in there. Maybe there's some really good hot spots. Whoops. Some really good hot spots right along the top in here. That's catching light. There we go. And just keeping it loose. Now, here's something fun you can do. I'm going to come over here and grab my smudge tool. And I'm going to come down, and I've got a brush. It's just a bunch of dots. You can, once you know how to make a brush, you can do the same thing. And I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to repeat this layer. I'm going to make a copy of it, and just hold on, because I always like to, if I'm going to experiment with something and I'm not sure if it's going to work, I'll make a copy of it, and then I'll work on the copy, and if I like it, then I'll dump the original. It's just my process. There's other ways you can do it. I'm going to knock this down a little bit, and I'm going to knock the strength down on the smear tool. Now watch, I can come in and create, I'm going to knock that strength up a little bit now. I can create some grass, you know, and just kind of play with that, get a little bit more texture in there. Get a little bit of blending going on. But I'm still staying very loose with it, see? It's very loose. Eventually, I'm probably going to cover a lot of this up with a little bit of kind of dust, mist in the air, but I wanted something to be sitting back there. So now I can turn off, which one is it? There we go. There, sorry, one layer I didn't label. I'm turning off that drawing back there. So that layer 11, I want to turn that off, and so we can see it without the drawing sitting over the top of it. I'm kind of liking that. Yeah, okay. So now let's go ahead and get that elephant laid in. So I'm going to go to here and create a layer on top. And I'm going to go elephant, local color. Local color is the color of an object when it's not lit and it's not in shadow. So I'm just going to go in right now and just create that basic color of the elephant. So I want to go like a warm gray. So I'm going to come down into the brown red zone and come in right in here, keep it kind of warm, kind of a mid-tone, because I'm thinking about, I'm gonna end up going darker in areas in the shadows. I'm gonna go lighter in areas, but I want to start with that mid-tone. So once again, let's come up here. I'm gonna turn this off real quick, just so I can see, and knock that up a little more, a little brighter, just so I can see my line work a little bit better. And all I'm going to do right now is I'm just quickly, all in one shot, like I'm doing a silhouette, I'm just quickly going to lay in this color. I might go outside the lines here and there, that's okay. Just go in and erase it real quick. But I'm going to use that locking the layer like I showed you earlier. I'm going to lock that layer, and we're going to vary up some of the color. I had it right the first time. My brain short-circuited. You just saw it. There we go. Come in here. I'm just coming through. And I'm even going to color in the tusks, because I want everything in there. Because I'm going to lock that layer, and then when I start painting over it, it'll only stay inside where I've painted. When I start adding the variations in the local color, it'll only paint where I've already painted. So I've got that very quickly laid in. Let's turn that back on. So now you can see a little better where I need to clean up the line work a little bit here. There we go. Clear that up a little bit, clean that up a little bit. There. All that feels pretty good. You can see some of the areas where I didn't quite hit it enough. Once again, I'm just laying in this local color. So let's go ahead now. I'm going to go ahead, get that a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and start varying it up a little bit. I want to go a little bit darker. Down below, I'm going to lock this layer. And I want it to feel like the bottom part of the elephant is kind of wet, so that the skin's going to be darker where he's wet. Once again, don't think of this as shading or anything like that. I'm just doing local color. So it'll look a little bit weird, but maybe it's, you know, he's gotten splashed. I'm going to knock this back a little bit. Now I'm going to go maybe a little cooler in areas, maybe up a little higher. And just like I said, just to vary it up. There we go. Go a little bigger with that brush. There we go. Just a little cooler. Play with some areas in there. I'm going to go a little darker. Just a little darker in here and have some fun. I don't need a brush that big. Have some fun in here. Maybe there's a little bit of color changes in the face. Definitely along here. In the trunk, maybe the trunk's a little darker. You can see I'm just going very, very quickly, very loosely. I'm going to go a little darker with it still. Eventually we're going to have some nice texture over this guy. There we go. I'm just playing with local color. I want to hit some pinker areas. Asian elephants tend to have freckles and some pink skin here and there, so I'm just going to do that in here. There we go. Very quickly. Their ears tend to be kind of freckled and they'll get little blotches here and there. And I'll get that more defined later on, but I just want to kind of hit it now in a couple of areas. There we go. Maybe there's a little bit in the neck. You can see I'm keeping it very, very loose. Let's go a little darker, grayer. Once again, just playing with variance in the color. Maybe a little warmer, playing with that. And you can hear my brush. I'm just going really quick, not even thinking about stuff. Just playing up with the variance in the color. I'm going to go cooler with that and a little darker. Get into the butt over here. Go a little cooler with it. Here we go. There. Maybe a little lighter. Just a little bit down in here. I'm just playing with it. Just having a good time playing with the color. And we'll get little blotches here and there later on, but right now I'm just keeping it nice and loose. I'm going to go a little back to my warmth, a little bit of warmth, and just warm up the trunk just a bit. There's a lot of blood in there, and same with the ears. Maybe warm that up a little bit. There. So now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay in this water. And I think I'll do that under the elephant, but over the reeds. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer, call that water. The background reeds is what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to go, I'm imagining it, well, actually, you know what we can do? We can keep this very simple. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to get rid of this. We're going to come here, and I'm going to take the trees, and I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to, just in the same way that we flopped the elephant drawing, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to flop, go over to transform, and I'm going to flop the background trees, and I'm going to drag them down because those trees are going to be reflected right into the water. So I'm just going to do this. There we go. And we'll be able to vary it up a little bit later. Right there we go. That feels good. And we can do the same thing with these reeds back here. So I'm going to take these guys and repeat them. And I'm going to flop them. And move them down. Now I'm going to, because the horizon's right about there, I'm just going to keep them a little bit lower. There we go. And then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to repeat it. And I'm going to flop it. Whoops, here we go. But I want this to be underneath. I want the reflection to be underneath the actual reeds that we've created, because that reflection's not going to quite be, I'm not going to drag it down as far. So we're just going to sit in there like so. And now we're free to create our lily pads and all that kind of stuff right on top. But watch what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to take these and go to layer, merge layers. I've got those highlighted. So now I've got just that right there. So watch what I'm going to do. First thing I'm going to do, because I want this to feel like water, and there's going to be a little bit of disturbance on the water. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to image adjustments, and I'm going to go to my hue and saturation, and watch. I'm going to darken it just a touch. Your reflections usually aren't as bright as the actual, because light gets lost, so it's usually not quite as bright as the actual object. So I'm going to darken it a bit first. Now I'm going to come up and I'm going to go to my filters. And I'm going to go to blur, and I'm going to go to motion blur. And I'm going to blur that straight up and down. Now the amount that I've got now is a little too much, but you can see, there we go. We're getting a nice little effect. I'm going to pull it back just a little bit more. There we go, like so. Now, once again, because I want to experiment a little bit, I'm going to turn that off. I just repeated the layer. And I'm going to come in here, back to my smudge tool, right here. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to grab a very simple brush right here. And watch what I do. I'm going to knock, that strength is up to 64. And I'm just going to experiment. I want to see if it's going to work. Knock that size down just a touch. And watch. I'm going to create little ripples. There we go. Just creating some ripples in this reflection. Now a lot of this is going to be covered up with lily pads, but this will be a nice base to put the lily pads on. Now this is an area of high contrast right here where I'm working, so I want to take a little bit more time, make it look right. There we go. So now we've got this nice Oops, I'm pulling in the edge. We got this kind of ripply water. That feels kind of good. Now it feels like he's standing in a lake, doesn't it? It's kind of cool. All right. Now, let's go ahead. I want to go ahead and just roughly lay in some of these lily pads. So I'm going to go right. I'm going to start with the lily pads in front of the elephant. And I'm going to be very rough to begin with, starting out. There we go. And I'm going to keep everything basically one color. It'll be a little lighter, not super pure in color. And I think this will be good. This will be a good brush. And these guys, they're going to add interest. I'm going to go a little more opaque. I don't like that brush. I'm going to grab a different brush. There we go. And because I'm working on my own, on a different layer, I can move these around if I want. I'm actually going to, let's see here. And I know that with the way that lily pads are shaped, you got a little break in here. And I want to make sure that I'm staying on the same plane. You know, if I draw the lily pads if I make them too round, they're going to look like they're sitting on their edge or something like that. I want to make sure that, like this one doesn't quite feel right. So I'm going to just kind of erase that back a hair. And I want to make sure the scale, maybe there's one right in here. I want to make sure the scale stays right too. And once again, I'm thinking about where I want the eye to go. And I want to play with that elephant reflection, so I don't want to cover up too much of the water with the lily pads. Maybe we'll just do more over here. And some of these lily pads will sit on top of each other. There we go. There's all different sizes. And you'll see once we kind of lock this layer in and we start playing with this, we're going to get different colors. You know, there's variances in the color, but you can see that we're starting to get a nice feel for the water. We're going to have some nice yellows. Let's get a bigger one in here just to keep our scale consistent. I'll bring that size down a hair. And bring that opacity up. Some of them, you know, they don't sit, you know, they kind of pop up in the air a little bit. And you're going to see too, as they recede, they're going to reflect the light a little bit differently in places. And we'll have the ability, and maybe there's just a whole bunch back here, so I can just go really kind of loose with it. Like I said, I'm keeping this whole thing pretty loose. I'm just going to have some fun. And I'm just creating a little environment here. There's some sitting up on their edges, you know, little pieces flapping up in the air. You know, if you've ever gone to a lily pond or hung out in the swamps or anything like I did, I waded through a lot of these places and I've painted them on location. And so one of the things I've discovered is that you really can be pretty loose when you're just laying them in like this. There, we got a nice feel happening there. There, and let's continue. I want to continue keeping these guys, making it feel like they're coming back into, you know, they're all bunching up as they recede. They're just all over each other, and I can be loose with it. And actually, these are going back behind the elephant, so I'm just going to create a new layer. There we go, and they'll just be behind. There's some back there. And you can see, you know, all that ripple that I created, it's getting kind of covered up, but that's okay. There's a nice feel of all the lily pads. Now, one of the other things that they'll have, I'm going to go a little warmer, maybe a little brighter. Go a little smaller with that brush. Actually, a lot smaller with the brush. You know, they have stems. Some of those stems will stick up out of the water. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. I want to stay on top. There we go. So I'm just going through and kind of randomly adding these little bits of stem that are coming up out of the water, just to give it a little bit of variety. There we go. Perfect. Go a little darker. Now, these reflections I'll have to draw in, so I'm just going to do that really quick. There. Now, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock that layer. I'm going to come in and grab some of this color, and I'm going to go a little hotter and brighter with it. I'm going to grab a different brush, and I'm just going to lightly work over the top of this. And you can see those ones back there are getting a little brighter. I want it to feel like they're catching light a little differently. And I'm just playing up some of the variants. I'm going to go jump back to my other brush. There we go. I'm varying up some of the feel of some of these, like they're catching a little light a little differently. I'm thinking of the light being back over in this area. But I want it to feel like it's varied. I really want these to be colored in. And I'll jump over to, there we go. I'll jump over to this layer and lock that as well. And I'll get some color that way. There we go. So you can see already we're getting a nice bit of variance. Now, some of these they'll be wet and they're going to really catch some bright color. So now I'm going to go in a little more carefully and just think about, okay, where's that catching light? Maybe that's catching light along in there. You know, there's just little pieces. I'm working from the broad and going to the detailed. Okay? Actually, I'm not crazy about that. This looks a little fake to me, so I'm going to come in and just kind of cover that back up. There we go. I'm feeling like it's going a little too bright. I don't need to go as bright as I'm going. There we go. And then a lot of this is already super dark. But one thing, I'm going to turn the lock, I'm going to turn that off. And a lot of these will catch, they'll create little shadows. You know, they wrinkle up and they create these little dark pockets along their edges. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create these little dark pockets. I'll blow that up so you can see it a little better. But notice how loose I'm being. Just nice and loose. Creating these little, just so it feels like they kind of curl up a little bit along the edge, you know. Here we go. Maybe where they overlap. Maybe there's one along here. And it just creates a little bit more interest and reality. Let's drop that size down so I can get a little bit more detail back here. Maybe not go quite as dark because it's further away. And there's a lot of lighter values back there. But now I'm creating a little bit more interest. Like so. And you see how fast we lay these in. But a lot of this just comes from observation, getting out there and, you know, looking at the world. I've done so much painting on location that I can go home and I can make some of this stuff up because I've looked at it, you know? And that's the key. You want to get out and you want to look at the world and observe it and then bring it back into the studio with you. Let's do that a little bit right in here. There we go. That feels pretty good. Nice and simple. Now I want to go in, I'm going to lock that again. I want to go in and get a little bit of variance in the green. I want to go warmer, definitely warmer. Maybe, well, keep it the same value, but definitely warmer. You know, there's areas of these lily pads that, you know, they die off a little bit. So I want to get a little bit of variance that way. Let's go a little bit redder. You know, they're not all green. You know, you get a little bit of variance. Maybe some of them are all brown. Just a touch, just enough to add a little bit of variety in there. There we go. We'll add a little variety there, maybe some over there. There, that feels pretty good. One thing I'm not liking, I want to go a little brighter. I want to come in here, drop that down a little bit. This feels too dark to me, so I want to lighten that up. Just a touch. And because of where the light is located, I'm going to just create a little bit of, I'm going to go really warm with it. I'm going to create these little highlights. Just, you know, right along some of the edges. Actually, I'm going to turn that off now, that locked layer, so I can create like little water highlights here and there, make it feel, maybe there's stuff on the water. Creating little areas where it might, water droplets might catch a little bit of light. And a lot of times that happens right along the water's, the lily pad's edge. They'll catch a little bit of light there. And I'm just going very, very quickly because I want it to feel spontaneous. I don't want it to feel too labored. There we go. This is all feeling pretty good. You can see we're getting a nice feel. Maybe these are wet and they're reflecting back some of that light. I'm thinking about, you know, I'm always thinking about the that light source and what's happening. I try to stay very loose. You know, maybe there's a whole piece of leaf right there. You know, maybe this is folded up and it's catching light right there. You know, there's light being caught right where it touches the water, that reed. There we go. Staying loose. Staying loose. There we go. Maybe a little bit over here. We're getting a nice little pond happening. Now a lot of this is going to be covered up with reeds, so I'm not going to worry about it too much right now. Once I cover it up with reeds, then we'll see what we need to do. And even some back in here might be catching light. A little floating debris on the water back there, catching a little bit of light, like so. Notice too, it's all in the values. You know, I went and grabbed a really bright value because then that tells the brain, when you look at this, you go, oh, it's reflecting sunlight. You know, it's wet. Your brain is just used to seeing that kind of stuff. So now let's see how we're feeling. That feels pretty good. I got a nice, oops, sorry about that. I just hit the mic. Got a nice thing going on. So let's jump back over to the elephant. I want to add some shadow now. So I'm going to create a layer on top. Actually, I'm going to go right on top of everything, I think. And I'm going to multiply. I'm going to set it to multiply. Now watch what happens. I'm going to go probably a little cooler with it, but still on the warm side, the gray side of the cool. And because I want it to be backlit, I'm going to go pretty big with all the shadows. Whoops. I'm going to drop that down, the opacity down. And let's just see what this looks like. It might be a little too much. So I'm going to go a little brighter. And I've set it to multiply. Now multiply, what that does is whatever I lay down, it multiplies with the layer underneath, so it goes dark. And so I'm just going to come in here really quickly. I'm just going to lay this in. There we go. Actually go a little smaller with it. And I'm thinking about, okay, there's a hollow in here that's going to be in shadow. Maybe the top of the eye here is catching some light. But ultimately this all goes into shadow. We're going to catch some light along the top of the ear, but this is all in shadow. There we go. So I'm trying to think, I'm thinking about that light source being back here, and right now all I'm painting in is what I think is going to be in shadow. And I know that it's going to be somewhat, I mean not totally rimlit, but somewhat rimlit. It's going to be more shadow than light. So this is where I'm talking about, this is kind of a cheat in digital painting terms, because you're able to just paint your shadow right on, rather than like if you're painting traditionally, you got to change your pigment and all kinds of stuff. But here you can just lay it right in. So here it's going to go, let's see here. This part will go, you know, the back part of the skull will go into shadow. This is probably casting, we're probably casting a shadow. I'm going a little too big with that brush. We're casting a shadow onto the neck. But then we go back into light, back into shadow, back into light. I'm looking at my reference here. There we go. And then maybe down here, let's bring this down again. Maybe down here, it's going to catch a little bit more light again, because it's gotten, you know, the head and everything is casting a shadow across the front of the shoulder here, but then the bottom part of the elephant is okay. It's catching light down here. I'm going to go big with this. There we go. Casting shadow. This is all going to be in shadow, so I'm just darkening everything. And notice how we're naturally getting nice variances in the texture of the animal. I'm going to go a little smaller with this brush. Now I'm going to come back here. Now I'm going to erase this back, because I think this hip is going to catch a little bit of light. I feel like it should. I want it to get, I think it'll give it a little bit more form too. And then I'll let this drop off. All of this will go right into shadow. There we go. There, we'll just lighten that up, or darken that up, I mean. And then I want to get there. And then I think this will go into shadow along there. So we're getting a little bit more, let me darken that up a little bit. There we go. Getting a little bit more form going. Now that feels pretty good. I'm going to make my eraser smaller. And come in here and erase that back a little bit. There we go. There's some nice shadow shapes. So now, what am I doing? Well, I'm starting to define that form a little bit. That's the goal. I want to define the form. And just get a nice little sense of light. So now that we got that, I'm going to go ahead and create another layer on top. And then this time I'm going to set it to overlay. And what's going to happen there is I'm actually going to lighten it just a touch. And then I'm going to actually, once these two basic light and shadow layers are laid in, then I go in with actual pigment and start working over the top. And I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to go smaller with this brush because I want it to be a little more detailed. I'm going to knock that opacity down a little bit. And I'm just going to hit some of these hotter areas. And you can see as I paint over the top of this, I'm getting it a little hotter. There we go. Getting a little better sense of light over the top. There. Trying to keep it loose. Keeping it loose. There we go. That feels good. All right, so now we can start working over the top. One of the things I want to do is I want to create a kind of a reflected light layer. So I'm going to actually grab that color. Now I want to go a little warmer with it and maybe a little brighter with it. So now we can come in here, I can come in, and I'm thinking about some of this light, this warm green light bouncing up off the bottom of the elephant. And I'm going to, yeah, we're working over the top of the drawing layer. I'm just going to work right over the top and give a little bit of reflected light back here. Give it a little bit more form, maybe underneath the cheeks. It's catching a little bit of light under there. See that? Maybe off these cheekbones. Those cheekbones protrude out, so I want to create a little reflected light. But you can see I'm just creating, I'm trying to stay within the value range slightly and just lighten up a few areas. There's a little bit of light being caught on here. The underside of that tusk right there, definitely underneath the trunk. Just going to lighten that up. See, we're getting a nice sense of kind of bounced light coming up. I'm going to do the same thing in here. It's kind of bouncing off maybe not as much because we don't have as much, anything bouncing up back in here. So this will I'm going to actually keep all this stuff dark back here. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to create another layer and I'm going to multiply it again because I want to go even deeper with my darks now. And you'll see what I do. And I'm slowly building up my layers from that local color. I want to get in here. I know that there's going to be some nice deep shadows in here. So I'm going to do that. Maybe up in here. I want some dark areas around the mouth. Maybe in here where it's not quite as, there's not as much bounced light coming in there. There's a little bit of darkness under the eye that I want to hit just around the eye. And we'll get some more detail in the eye in just a second. Definitely back in here. This is going to be deep shadow. There's really no light reaching that back leg on the inside. So I want to make sure I'm hitting that nice and dark and then popping this leg forward so I'm adding some darkness in there. And you notice too, I can now go in and add a little bit of texture to the skin if I want. So I'm going to do that here as well. I don't want it to be super textury. It doesn't have to be. And a little bit deeper shadow back in here. And definitely back in here. Under the tail. There we go. There. Maybe we'll emphasize some of that wetness where it feels like, she's been walking through, or he has been walking through some water and he's a little bit wet there. We can play with that a little bit. Can add a little bit of texture. I'm just going to go really loose with it. There we go. Adding some texture. You know, they have little blotches. Maybe I'll add a few blotches here and there on the skin. There we go. Right now I'm playing up some of the light and dark. But we're getting a great sense of light already, and we haven't even pushed it yet. So now we've got some deeper, darker shadows. Let's go ahead. I like to jump back and forth between my lights and my darks. So I'm going to go ahead and grab here, and I'm going to go even warmer and brighter with some of these highlights. And we're really going to, now we're going to paint directly into the lights. So I'm going to get right in here. Whoops. You come down a little bit in the size, come up in the opacity, and I'm just going to really blast some of these highlights. Nice and bright. I want them to feel rim lit. So I'm going to go right along that edge. Make it feel like he's getting hit nice and bright right along that light. There we go. And here I can start to add, you know, a little bit of texture. That's a little too much right there. Actually, no, it wasn't. It felt pretty good. I'm going to come down. Let me blow this up a little bit so you can see it a little better. I tend to kind of not think about the size. And because of where the sun is, I'm thinking about those ridges catching that light in a certain way, and I want this to be really nice and bright right along here. Once again, I'm just keeping it loose. I just want to catch an impression. There we go. Let's do the same thing up here. He's catching some light, maybe creating a little texture in the wrinkly skin. I go a little bigger with that brush. And I'm going to get nice and detaily. I'm going to go back smaller with the brush. I want to get nice and detaily right in here. I can do that now. There we go. He's catching light right there. Maybe catching a little light along that edge. Definitely right in here. We'll go a little brighter with it. Really feels like he's got a nice little hollow spot right there above his eye, which they do. I'll emphasize that brow a little bit. There, that's feeling kind of good. And I'm going to go right over the top. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go, where's my shadow layer? There it is. I'm going to go under that shadow layer. Oops, and I'm going to go nice and bright with this tusk. But you can see, even though I've got it set to a fairly bright value on the color wheel, it's staying, you know, within the shadow range because it's under the shadow layer. I'm letting that shadow layer do its work, and I'm just going to keep that right under there, like so. There we go. And the deeper, darker shadows were in here. So right along there, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create just a little bit of a dark shadow along that edge. And now on top of here, I'm just going to come back up here and maybe paint on top just a little brighter, where I feel like it'll catch a little bit of the blue sky light, just a touch. It's not being lit, although over here it would be lit. So I'm going to brighten that way up on the back side, right back here. That would be catching some light right there, just like so. There we go. That feels right. Good. Let's shrink that up. So now we're getting a good sense of light on the animal. Let's come back here and grab that light again. And I'm just going to continue hitting some of these highlights. There we go. Once again, staying loose. Maybe getting a little bit back there, keeping it rim lit. There. That's a little much. There we go. Like so. Once again, I want to go maybe a little brighter and catch, maybe that hip is catching a little bit of light inside the shadow area. Maybe it's catching a little light in here. And I'm able to add a little bit of texture. Go smaller with that brush. I'm just staying very, very loose. Catching some light on that elbow. There, that's feeling pretty good. Maybe we're catching a little light on the ear. Right in there. That feels good. Now, I'm going to grab some of these colors. Go slightly darker. Watch what I do. I'm going to just stay on this layer. I want to create these freckles. Whoops. I think I went too dark, so I'm going to go here. And it's just a little detail-y thing. I'm just going to create a few freckles on the ears and up around the face. There we go. Very, very lightly, very, very loose. And then I'm going to grab this same color and do the same thing going the other direction. There we go. So it's feeling a little more freckly. Whoops. Let me grab some of, whoops, cancel. There we go. I'm going to grab some of this color. And just paint in a little bit of negative space for those freckles. There we go. That feels pretty good. There. And then up here, go a little bit brighter. And the hair, I'm going to paint a little bit of hair in there. The you know, they get a little bit of peach fuzz right up on top, and I want to paint it a little brighter, a little reddish, like it's catching some light against that dark. You see why I wanted to paint this against the dark? There. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and get really detail-y. I want to get in here and paint this guy in. They have a very kind of red eye, brown red eye. So I'm just going to get in here, do like so. And since I want to give them a little character, I'm going to put a little bit of white to the eye. There we go. And maybe even give them a little pupil, which they have. There we go. And I think maybe I'm going to put another layer on top just in case I don't like it. I'm going to reflect a little bit of that sky in the eye here. Just a touch. You can see I'm just reflecting a little bit of that sky in there, and then I'm going to catch just a few little highlights. Actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab that color and I'm going to go fairly brighter with it, and I'm going to catch just a few little highlights under the eye. I want to bring just a little bit more attention to it. Like so. There we go. Maybe in here the skin's a little bit lighter. There. I'm staying very, very loose. I don't want to get super detailed with this image. I don't need to. There we go. Go a little brighter with it. And maybe he's catching a little bit of light, that reflected light down here. There we go. So this is where I kind of, I just kind of noodle a little bit. I noodle a little bit here and there, trying to stay within my value ranges, but I'm really trying to vary up what's happening and get some interest. So now we got kind of a nice thing happening. Let me go a little brighter over here. There we go. We got a nice thing happening there. And I'm actually gonna rim light that just a little bit. I want it to pop a little better. So I'm just gonna go ahead and draw it in. There we go. There, that feels pretty good. I want this to feel like it's catching a little bit of light. Once I get to this stage, I just kind of do everything all in one layer. I'm just kind of building it all up. That's going to catch a little light, maybe catch a little light along these shapes in here. There we go. I'm going to jump down to my local color. I'm going to erase that back. There we go. Now let's go ahead and have some fun with this. So let's do this. Okay, so I just merged everything together and put it underneath. I created new layers and merged everything that we've done, merged it all into one layer because I want to, and then repeated it. I copied the layer because now I want to come back up to my edit and transform, and we're going to flop it vertically. You can see I've got it underneath. And I want to make sure that I've got it in the right area. I think it's underneath everything that needs to be there. Let's just go ahead and move it and see what we get. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this down and just let it sit right in there. There we go. That feels pretty good. We're sitting good there. Yeah, let me move that a little bit. There we go. There, that feels pretty good. Bring that up a hair. And now, like I did before, I'm gonna go ahead and darken it. Let's darken that a little bit. Okay, just a touch. And then I want to get rid of that drawing. I want to get rid of the drawing on the reflection. We're just going to dump that. Just going to dump it, get rid of it. There we go. And just like we did with the reeds, actually I'm going to come over here and erase this a little bit back. There we go. Just like we did with the reeds, I want to kind of get some ripples in there. So back to our smear brush. And I'm just going to start rippling. That feels pretty good. Just having some fun with it, being loose. That's, once again, that's the whole idea. Stay loose. Keeping it fun. You know, I had an idea for a painting and I don't want to labor it. I just want to have some fun with it. Maybe some of these ripples are coming around like so. There we go. There we go. That feels pretty good. Now let's go ahead and lay in these butterflies. Butterflies. There we go. And I'm gonna start out with some nice bright, where's my butterfly reference? I gotta find that. Here it is. I like that there's an orange one that I'm probably gonna stick with because we've got so much green happening in here. I think sticking with that orange will be nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and just paint in a whole bunch of orange and maybe some yellow. I'm gonna make up butterflies. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to put the, I'm going to go under the butterfly drawing. There we go. Let's go a little smaller with that. There. And keeping it very, very, very loose. There we go. Just create a couple other just simple shapes. There. That all feels pretty good. Actually, I'm going to take the butterflies and move them all up on top. There we go, because this was this one we don't need. We didn't even use that one. There we go. I want that to be nice and bright, sitting over the top of that shadow like that. And we got one back here. I'm just having fun. Very loose. I want this whole thing to feel loose. Maybe just a couple little dots in the background. But see how this is kind of it's like the little icing on top. And I'm gonna go like, let's make some little orange or yellow marks on some of these. I just want to have, I want it to feel like it's kind of magical and we're just having a little bit of fun and staying very, I know I sound like a broken record. I'm just staying loose. I'm not worrying about detail. This is more of an impression. I just want this to feel like an impression. There we go. And I want that elephant to feel like he's having a good time. Like so. And then maybe there's there's some nice little dark markings on them. Let me go really small with that. There we go. Yeah. Just creating little marks. Very, very loose. Getting an impression of what these, of them, you can tell they're butterflies. You don't need to sit in there and render everything. That's not the idea. I just want to create a sense of light and place and just a little bit of fun. Now, one more thing I want to do is I want to create those reeds, and I'm going to go nice and somewhat bright and pure with them. And just let's just see. I'm going to go nice and opaque, maybe a little smaller. So notice I'm just staying very loose, because once again I just want an impression. I'm going to go even smaller with that brush. I'm just going to leave the drawing right underneath, give it a little interest. So we're creating this foreground element with these reeds. Staying loose, having fun, not worrying about it. Let's get a little bit more in here. You notice all the kind of the broken ones that I'm drawing. Maybe the reeds get really thick over here. There we go. There. Now I'm going to try something else. I'm going to go behind the elephant, kind of over everything else, well, behind there. I want to create a little bit of a kind of haze in the air. So I'm going to come over here to my gradient tool, and I'm going to grab this gradient right here, and I'm going to knock that opacity way down. I just want to see what we get. Oh, that pops a little bit. It doesn't actually, that doesn't look too bad. It gives it a little bit of, gives it a little heat. There we go. That feels pretty good. Like that. I like that kind of, that little sense of heat that you get on it. There we go. That feels pretty good. I want to see what happens if I repeat that shadow layer. Yeah, that's too much. I'm going to get rid of that. See, I do a lot of experimenting at this stage. So now I'm going to come back up to my reeds. There we are. Come up to those reeds. I'm going to lock that layer. And I'm going to go and I'm going to vary them up a little bit. Just want to have a little bit of variance in some of this color. I've locked that layer so I don't have to, there we go. So I don't have to worry about going inside the negative space. I'm just very loosely coming in and having some fun with it, not worrying about anything else. And I want to feel like some of it's catching light. Some of these reeds are catching light. Whoops, there we go. There. It just gives it a little bit of variety. We'll hit some areas here. I want that to feel, you know, I want this to catch your eye a little bit, so maybe we'll catch a little bit there. These need to stand out a little better, so I'm going to hit those a little bit. But you can see, by locking that layer, I can just get in here and very quickly just kind of hit a few random strokes here and there. I can do the same thing with shadow too. I can come in and like, I'm creating shadow here and there. There. So we got a few reeds. I'm going to turn the lines off, see what happens. There we go. So we've got a little bit of a illustration happening here. That feels pretty good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to, let me try something here. I'm going to go ahead and hit this. I'm going to combine these layers. And I'm going to blur it with the Gaussian blur, just a touch. Just to push that back just a little bit. I think I'm going to do the same thing here. But not quite as blurred. It's like they're coming forward a little bit. There we go, just so we get a little bit more depth. There. And I'm going to come back to my butterflies. Where are they? Where's my butterflies? Here we go. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to grab some color because there's a butterfly down here. I want to see. This is where I just kind of, I'm having some fun with it now. I'm just kind of experimenting. Just adding a little bit of color there. There we go. And I don't like that, so I'm going to get rid of that altogether. There, it's gone. So that feels better. So now, I think we've got something that feels pretty good. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to get behind, I want to get behind the elephant here. I'm going to put a layer there. I want that, I think I want that haze all the way down. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool and I'm going to grab this one over on the left, and I'm just going to drop a layer down and just create a little bit more haze back there. There we go. Then I'm going to come up to my shadow layer and I'm going to clean up some of these edges. There we go. So I'm going to drop that opacity back just a touch. So I want it to pop a little bit better than that. There we go. That feels pretty good. Now we're getting a nice little bit of depth in there. That feels nice. All right. So once again, in the spirit of keeping it loose, I'm not really going to do much more to it. Maybe come in here and go maybe just a few touch-ups. Some of these edges. I want to come up on top. I'm just going to throw a layer on top and just to hit some of these edges. Create a little bit more texture maybe. A little bit of reflected, feel like we're getting a little bit more reflected light underneath. And loosely show a little bit of texture maybe. There we go. Just tiny little touches here and there at this stage that I like to throw in. Once again, this might be something where I'm just doing a quick sketch for an idea. There we go. I want to get that edge, have a nice edge to that ear so it pops out a little bit. There we go. Just like so. Good. Now, one thing I'm going to try. We've gotten this far. I'm going to try something. I'm going to we're going to take all these layers and I'm going to do this and I'm going to copy them. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and merge those layers. I want to keep my original ones, underneath, but I've got this layer on top now. So now I want to try something. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that. Just I have an extra. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab some nice hot color, really hot, real yellow. I'm going to come up here and grab kind of an airbrush. And I'm going to go, let's see, go kind of big with it. There we go, like so. There we go. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to drop my opacity way down, like 9%. I'm going to go to color dodge. Now I want this to feel nice and hot. First thing I want to do is I'm going to come up here and go to my hue and saturation. I want this to be a little bit more saturated. I want it to pop a little better. There we go. Now I'm going to come in here. Now I've got this set to color dodge and I got the opacity set way down. And watch what happens. I'm going to come in here and really hit these edges. And notice what else it's doing. It's giving it like a little glow outside the silhouette of the elephant. I want to really get this to feel like, wow, there's some light there. There we go. And I set that opacity way down so I'll have a lot of control with it. But notice now we got nice brightness happening, and we can do it with the butterflies as well. Make those nice and hot. Get them to pop against that dark background. Make them feel like they're being really lit. Might even be able to do it with some of these reeds. I don't want to hit too much of the reeds because I don't want to draw too much attention away from our subject matter, which is the elephant and the butterflies. There we go. That feels kind of fun. And now I'm going to do one last thing. I always like to do this, especially in a day like this. There's going to be a lot of like little insects and things like that up in the air. I'm going to grab a small brush there. And I'm going to put this back to normal. Bring that opacity up. There's always a lot of like little insects and stuff like that in the air. So I'm just going to kind of come through, and there's dust. So I'm just going to come through and just add stuff in the air. Just add some stuff. I've got another brush here. It's a splatter brush. Now we can get some nice texture. There's things up in the air here. See, I got this little splatter brush where I can add, it feels like insects back there. I'm going to go a little bigger with it. Just adds a little bit of fun texture over the top. There's a lot of insects out there and dust in the air. Go a little smaller with the brush now. There. And just go lightly. It just adds a nice little touch. Makes it feel like the air is heavy. There's stuff in the air. There we go. There. That feels pretty good. And that's how I create my paintings. So I hope you learned something here. It's a lot of fun. Get in there if you have the ability to work digitally. Get in there and have some fun with it. Just experiment and think about approaching it very systematically. I start with my rough drawing, my local color, start adding shadows, highlights, that sort of thing. Start building things up, and also think about depth and thinking of your layers, working back to forward, okay? So anyway, like I said, I hope you learned something, had a good time, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, please hit the red subscribe button down below. Spread the word. And also, if there's something that you're not seeing that you'd like to see, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot.